Imagine it's March 1918. The Great War is raging across the Atlantic, and out on that vast, dangerous ocean, one of the United States Navy's largest ships, the USS Cyclops, simply disappears, vanishes. A vessel longer than a football field, carrying over 300 souls, gone without sending a single distress call, without leaving behind even a scrap of wreckage. It's a disappearance that would become the single largest loss of life in U.S. naval history, not directly involving combat. A mystery born in wartime that more than a century later still echoes with one persistent question. What happened to the USS Cyclops? So, what was this ship? The USS Cyclops wasn't a sleek destroyer or a mighty battleship. She was a collier, one of the vital, hard-working support ships often overlooked. Think of her as a massive, technologically advanced floating fuel depot for the Navy's coal-hungry fleet. Built in Philadelphia and launched in 1910, she was a giant of her time, around 540 feet long and 65 feet wide. She could carry a massive load, over 12,000 tons of coal, and was among the largest and fastest Navy auxiliary ships afloat. Her design was quite advanced, featuring specialized gear to transfer coal to battleships efficiently, sometimes even while both ships were moving at sea. Pictures show complex rigging and massive buckets capable of moving thousands of pounds of coal per load. In an era when the Navy was transitioning from coal to oil power and projecting power across the globe, ships like the Cyclops were absolutely essential, the lifeline keeping the fleet moving. She wasn't just a coal carrier, though. She was designed to carry fuel oil, too, and had even helped transport refugees before the war. Initially, from 1910, she operated under the Naval Auxiliary Service with a civilian master and crew. But when the United States entered World War I in April 1917, everything changed. The Cyclops was officially commissioned into the Navy. Her civilian officers received commissions in the Naval Reserve Force, and Navy sailors replaced the civilian enlisted men. This shift in command structure, putting potentially disparate groups under military discipline, might have created some friction on board, especially considering who was in charge. She began supporting the war effort directly, assigned to the Naval Overseas Transportation Service. And that brings us to her final, fateful voyage in early 1918. The mission was critical. Sail from Norfolk, Virginia, deliver nearly 10,000 tons of coal to Allied warships operating off Brazil, and then haul back something desperately needed for the American war machine, roughly 11,000 tons of manganese ore. Manganese was crucial for making steel, essential for guns, ships, and munitions. The Cyclops left Norfolk around January 9, 1918, reached Rio de Janeiro later that month, and spent about 2 weeks unloading the coal and taking on that dense, heavy manganese. But trouble was already brewing. On the journey south to Rio, the ship suffered a serious mechanical failure. The high-pressure cylinder head on the starboard engine cracked or blew off. The ship's commanding officer, Lieutenant Commander George W. Worley, reported it. A Navy survey board looked it over in Rio, confirmed the damage, but essentially told him to head back to the United States for repairs. So the Cyclops was setting out on her long journey home, effectively crippled, running on only one of her 2 engines. This drastically cut her speed from a potential 15 knots down to maybe 10 and reduced her ability to maneuver, a dangerous situation for any ship, let alone one heading into the wartime Atlantic. And then there was the captain himself, George W. Worley. He looms large over this story, and not always in a good way. One of his own officers, Conrad Nervig, who, luckily for him, was transferred off the ship in Rio, later described Worley in rather unflattering terms: a gruff, eccentric salt of the old school, an indifferent seaman, and a poor, overly cautious navigator. Nervig claimed Worley was generally disliked by officers and crew alike. Other reports paint an even stranger picture: accusations of drunkenness, tales of him chasing an ensign with a pistol and making his rounds ship dressed only in long underwear and a derby hat. Nervig even attributed a sailor's drowning death directly to the captain's irrational methods and the resulting crew disorganization. Adding another layer of complexity, especially during wartime, was the later discovery that Worley had been born in Germany as Johann Friedrich Wichmann. This, combined with the presence of a controversial passenger, the American Consul General from Rio, Alfred Gottschalk, who was known for his pro-German sympathies, inevitably fueled suspicions about Worley's loyalty. Despite the engine trouble and the complex figure in command, the mission continued. The Cyclops left Rio around February 16th, made a scheduled stop in Bahia, Brazil, a few days later, and departed for Baltimore on February 22nd. She was expected to arrive around March 13th, but the voyage took another unexpected turn. On March 3rd, the Cyclops made an unscheduled stop in Bridgetown, Barbados. Why? Several accounts suggest it was because the ship was dangerously overloaded with the heavy manganese ore, so much so that her plimsoll line, the safe loading mark on the hull, was submerged. This should have been a major red flag. Yet, despite this warning sign, Worley reportedly took on additional coal and supplies while in Barbados, potentially making the situation worse. The American consul in Barbados noted Worley seemed unusually reticent during the visit. This stop is a critical puzzle piece. Was it just routine resupply? Was Worley recklessly ignoring danger, or was something else going on? On the afternoon of March 4, 1918, the USS Cyclops weighed anchor and steamed out of Barbados. Her last known communication, perhaps sent from Barbados or shortly after, was brief and tragically ironic. Weather fair, all well. She had about 1,800 nautical miles to go to reach Baltimore. She sailed over the horizon and into oblivion. Back in Baltimore, March 13th arrived, but the Cyclops did not. Days crawled by, weeks passed. Given the known engine trouble, perhaps some delay was initially expected, but soon concern turned into full-blown alarm. Where was she? The Navy launched an extensive search effort. Ships crisscrossed the waters between Barbados and the U.S. East Coast, scanning the waves for any sign. They found nothing, absolutely nothing. No floating debris, no lifeboats, no oil slicks, not a single identifiable piece of the massive collier. It was as if the ocean had simply erased her. This utter lack of physical evidence is one of the most perplexing aspects of the case. Usually, when a large ship goes down, something is left behind. Around April 15, 1918, more than a month after she was due, the news finally hit the papers. The Cyclops was missing, feared lost. The Navy might have held back the news initially, perhaps hoping for a delayed arrival or managing wartime information. But by June 1st, the hope was gone. Assistant Secretary of the Navy Franklin D. Roosevelt made the official declaration. USS Cyclops was lost, and all 309 souls aboard were presumed dead. For administrative purposes, their official date of death was recorded as June 14, 1918. The number itself varies slightly in reports, sometimes 306, sometimes 309, likely reflecting differences in counting crew versus total personnel, including passengers and a few prisoners on board, another small ambiguity in a sea of unknowns. So what could possibly have happened out there? With no wreckage and no final message, theories began to fly, ranging from the plausible to the outright fantastic. Could the ship herself have simply given up the ghost? This cluster of theories centers on structural failure and problems with her cargo. Remember, she was designed primarily for coal, a bulky but less dense cargo than the nearly 11,000 tons of heavy manganese ore packed into her holds. Did this immense weight, possibly concentrated improperly, overstress her structure? Officer Conrad Nervig certainly thought so. Based on his observations of the ship flexing and working on the voyage south, he believed the manganese, perhaps loaded mainly amidships because the experienced executive officer was allegedly confined to his quarters by Captain Worley during loading, fatally strained the vessel's known weaknesses. Nervig's chilling theory? The Cyclops simply broke in half and plunged beneath the waves almost instantly. This would explain the lack of an SOS or debris. Then there's the idea of slow decay playing a role. Admiral George Van Deurs later proposed that years of carrying acidic coal might have corroded the ship's vital longitudinal support beams, the I-beams. Imagine those weakened beams suddenly subjected to the stress of a dense ore cargo, possibly combined with the dynamic forces of heavy seas. It's a recipe for catastrophic failure. This wasn't just speculation. Another Navy collier, the USS Jason, was later found to have suffered exactly this kind of severe corrosion. Perhaps the most compelling evidence for a structural issue comes from the Cyclops' own sisters. She was one of 4 Proteus-class colliers. One, the Jupiter, had a long career, famously becoming the USS Langley, America's first aircraft carrier. But the other 2, USS Proteus and USS Nereus, met fates eerily similar to the Cyclops. Both vanished without a trace in the North Atlantic during World War II, years after being sold for commercial service. And crucially, both were carrying heavy loads of metallic ore, bauxite in their case, when they disappeared. 3 ships of the same class, all lost while carrying dense ore cargo? That points very strongly towards a fundamental design vulnerability when handling materials much heavier than the coal they were built for. Beyond the sheer weight, the cargo itself might have posed a hidden danger. Modern maritime safety regulations pay close attention to the risks of carrying bulk mineral cargoes like manganese ore. These cargoes, if they contain enough moisture, can shift dramatically or even liquefy under the vibration and motion of a ship at sea. Imagine that dense ore suddenly behaving like a thick fluid, sloshing uncontrollably across the hold as the ship rolls. This free surface effect can cause a rapid, unrecoverable loss of stability, leading to capsizing in minutes. This scenario fits perfectly with the Cyclops' sudden, silent disappearance. The combination of factors, Nervig's observations, the engine trouble, potential overloading, the ore's properties, the Van Deur's corrosion theory, the fate of her sisters, and modern knowledge of bulk cargo physics, makes this cluster of structural and cargo-related issues arguably the most well-supported explanation, grounded in multiple converging lines of evidence rather than single points of speculation. Nervig's specific claim about the knowledgeable officer being confined during loading even provides a direct link between Captain Worley's questionable leadership and a potential technical failure. But what about the power of the ocean itself? Could the Cyclops, weakened as she was, have simply been overwhelmed by the weather? The North Atlantic in March is notoriously fickle. Some accounts mention a fierce storm battering the Virginia Capes area around March 9th or 10th, potentially right in the Cyclops' path, although her reduced speed makes the timing uncertain. Could she have been rolled over by massive waves, capsizing too quickly for anyone to react, or perhaps struck by an unpredictable rogue wave? However, the weather theory isn't clear-cut. Conrad Nervig, among others, discounted severe storms, claiming records showed no major weather events along her likely route during the time she went missing. Some analyses of historical weather data seem to back this up, though specific records for her exact location and time are scarce in the available material, mentions NARA records potentially contradicting storm theory. And that final message reported weather fair. So while a storm remains a possibility, especially for a compromised ship, the evidence is conflicting. It's also quite possible that even moderately rough seas, not necessarily a hurricane-level storm, could have been the final straw for a vessel already struggling with engine problems, structural stress, and a heavy, potentially shifting cargo. Given the wartime context, the most immediate suspect for many was enemy action. A German U-boat or surface raider sinking the ship made perfect sense, especially with her valuable cargo. But this theory crumbled under investigation. Post-war examination of German naval archives revealed no record of any attack on the Cyclops. German authorities consistently denied any knowledge of her fate. Furthermore, Allied intelligence concluded that it was unlikely any U-boats were even operating in the specific area where the Cyclops is believed to have vanished. The darker whispers about Captain Worley's German berth and potential collusion with the enemy were also investigated, but no evidence of treachery was ever found. The focus on Worley's origins might reflect the intense anti-German sentiment of the time as much as objective suspicion. So despite being the most obvious wartime explanation, enemy action seems highly improbable. Could the trouble have come from within? We know the command climate under Worley was poor. Nervig spoke of a demoralized crew, and there were reports of a minor mutiny attempt even before the final voyage. Did simmering resentment boil over into a full-scale mutiny that somehow led to the ship's destruction? Or was there sabotage by disgruntled crew members, or hidden sympathizers. Again, these are dramatic possibilities, but they lack supporting evidence. The Navy's investigation found nothing to confirm them. While poor morale and leadership could certainly have contributed indirectly, perhaps leading to carelessness or slow reactions in a crisis, there's no proof they were the direct cause of the disappearance. And of course, no great sea mystery is complete without some wilder speculation. Theories floated included a massive explosion caused by the manganese ore or coal dust, or even, as one magazine suggested, a giant octopus dragging the ship to the depths. These ideas capture the imagination but lack any factual basis, really highlighting how the absence of concrete answers allows speculation to run rampant. Faced with all these conflicting possibilities and the stark lack of evidence, what did the official investigation conclude? The Navy looked into everything: the captain, the crew, the ship's condition, the cargo, potential enemy action, the weather. Their final verdict? They didn't know. The official position, maintained for decades, was that the cause of the Cyclops' loss remained an unsolved mystery. Navy Secretary Josephus Daniels famously called it one of the most baffling mysteries in the annals of the Navy. An official Navy statement admitted, "Many theories have been advanced, but none that satisfactorily accounts for her disappearance." While the Naval History and Heritage Command today suggests the most probable cause lies in that deadly combination of structural issues, the dense ore cargo, and possibly heavy seas, the official status remains unknown. This very lack of a definitive answer from the authorities helped fuel the legend and allowed the hand Cyclops to be swept up in another maritime enigma. You simply can't discuss the USS Cyclops today without mentioning the Bermuda Triangle, that vaguely defined, supposedly cursed patch of the Atlantic between Florida, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, famed in popular culture for swallowing ships and planes. The Cyclops vanished squarely within this geographical area, and her story became a cornerstone of the Triangle legend. Interestingly, the ship disappeared almost 50 years before the term Bermuda Triangle even became popular. Writer Vincent Gaddis coined the phrase in a 1964 magazine article and prominently featured the Cyclops in his 1965 book, Invisible Horizons. Later authors, like Charles Berlitz in his 1974 bestseller, further cemented the Cyclops in the public imagination as a victim of the Triangle's mysterious forces. But does the connection hold water? Critics like Larry Cushy meticulously researched many Triangle cases, including the Cyclops, and concluded the legend was largely a manufactured mystery, fueled by sensationalism and factual errors. Official bodies like the U.S. Coast Guard and NOAA maintain there's nothing paranormal about the region. It's simply a busy shipping lane subject to storms and human error. While the Cyclops was lost in the area, there's no evidence the Triangle caused it. The mundane, though tragic, explanations related to her specific vulnerabilities, her structure, her cargo, her engine, the weather, seem far more likely. The fact that her sister ships Proteus and Nereus also vanished nearby could be twisted to support the Triangle theory, but it far more strongly points to that common fatal flaw related to carrying dense ore, undermining the need for a supernatural explanation. So where does this leave us over 100 years later? The USS Cyclops, a behemoth of her time, along with the 309 people aboard her, vanished from the face of the earth. We have strong theories, with structural failure compounded by the heavy, potentially unstable manganese ore cargo, perhaps tipped over the edge by rough weather, emerging as the most plausible scenario, especially considering the fate of her sisters. But without the wreck, without that final piece of physical evidence, certainty remains elusive. It stands as the U.S. Navy's greatest loss of life outside of combat, a stark reminder of the unforgiving nature of the sea. The search, in a way, continues. Descendants of the lost crew, like Marvin Barash, have devoted years, even decades, to uncovering the ship's story, meticulously gathering records, writing books, and keeping the memory alive. They hold on to the hope that advances in undersea technology might one day locate the wreck, perhaps lying in the immense depths of the Puerto Rico Trench, as some speculate. Finding her remains is likely the only way to definitively answer the questions that have lingered for so long. Until that day, the USS Cyclops sails on in the realm of maritime legends. A ghost ship lost in the fog of war, her disappearance a chilling testament to the mysteries the ocean still holds. The 309 men aboard, sailors, officers, passengers, remain lost to time, their final moments unrecorded, their story, as one researcher poignantly put it, still waiting for its final chapter to be written.